Hey, can't you make this food taste better? It tastes a little off. Come on, make something better. Shouldn't a housewife be able to cook like we're eating out at a restaurant?
No, this is normal. Your taste buds are just too refined because you always eat at fancy restaurants. I'm the one who needs a break from this. 3 months into marriage, I've been enduring such complaints every day. My husband, Tony, expects way too much from me when it comes to the housework I do. He's never satisfied, even though I think I do a decent job.
Stretch the best sheets tighter, like they do in hotels. You really suck at housework, don't you?
The dream image my husband has is a classy, tidy, and elegant space, like the ones in fancy restaurants and hotels. It's far too much to expect from me. Unless we had a maid, there's no way someone as busy as me could do all that. If you're being picky about it, then why don't you do it yourself? Whenever I say this, my husband becomes quiet. He knows he can't manage the housework on his own, but he keeps forcing me to do it in his way, and I was getting really frustrated whenever he did that. Oh no, I left my wallet at home to go shopping. Am I too tired these days? On my way to the grocery, I realized I'd forgotten my wallet and returned home, where I heard strange noises from the living room. Huh? Is that Tony's voice? And who's he with? Just as I was about to take off my shoes, I noticed unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. Pumps? Are these women's shoes? Hearing my husband's voice mixed with a woman's and their embarrassing sounds echoing to the entrance, I quietly moved towards the living room. I caught my husband cheating with his mistress. What are you doing, you jerk? I recorded a video of my husband's affair without him noticing and sent it to our relatives. So my father-in-law messaged me on WhatsApp, and I stormed into the room where my husband and his mistress, Jane, were. I had my phone out and everything.
Hey, what are you doing?
I'm live streaming this to all our relatives.
Stop it, what are you doing?
Minutes later, my father-in-law and my father arrived at the scene, turning the whole thing into an absolute disaster for my husband. My name is Angela, and I'm 39 years old. Being part of a family full of civil servants, they always said I should be one too. So I studied a lot to pass the civil service exam. My father is a managing director at the city hall, and I was directed to work there by him. Working hard, I now hold a managerial position. But up until now, I was all about school and work, not really knowing much about dating and living on my own for ages. Now, my younger sister, who is 3 years younger than me, has gotten married and moved into our family home, so I rented an apartment nearby. But one day...
Excuse me, you dropped your wallet.
Oh, thank you very much. I got my wallet back from a random guy by the store I popped into on my way home from work. I didn't think much of it until I got home and found a note in it.
I'm waiting for your call.
Along with his name, there was also a phone number written on the note, and I had never experienced anything like this in my life. Hello, are you the person who found my wallet?
Yes, thank you for calling. I never thought you'd actually call.
Thank you for that time. Why did you do this?
When I saw you as I picked up your wallet, you were so beautiful. It was love at first sight. I couldn't say that at first, so I did this in a rush. Sorry, and thank you.
The man was surprised by my call and tried to hang up, not expecting me to actually reach out. He probably didn't know what to do. Please wait. Now that we're connected, may I thank you properly? With a slightly frightened voice, he agreed, and we decided to have lunch together the following Saturday. Thank you so much for that time. I don't know what I would have done if nobody had handed my wallet over.
No, I'm glad to hear you say that.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
His name was Tony, and he was older than me, at 42, having never been in a relationship and living as a bachelor. He worked as a plumber and lived alone, enjoying his carefree daily routine, eating out, and not worrying about money. He honestly shared his feelings, saying it was his first time falling in love at first sight, and he was glad he had impulsively put his number and message in my wallet. I see, but talking with you, Tony, is quite interesting. At that time, I found Tony's stories about his completely different life environment intriguing and never boring. In fact, I even found his company enjoyable. From then on, we started to contact each other whenever something happened. Before I knew it, Tony had started to stay at my apartment. A few months later, we decided to get married.
I can't believe Tony found such a beautiful wife like you. It's really great. I know my son is a bit foolish, but please take good care of him.
That's what my father-in-law said when we greeted each other. I felt guilty for having assumed that Tony's family wasn't wealthy based on his appearance and demeanor. Tony's family home was actually quite large and impressive. Hey, what did your dad do? He has a pretty impressive house.
My dad? He was a police officer, a strict one at that. I hated him and always rebelled against him.
A police officer? Wow, that's impressive.
Not really. Try living with him in the family, it's annoying.
At that moment, I couldn't understand my husband's point of view. To me, having a police officer as a father seemed strong and reliable, right? Oh, I see. That was all I could reply at the time, and then our married life began. However, this marriage turned into a hellish life beyond imagination due to my husband's excessive ideals about women.
Hey, what's up with this food? Can't you make something tastier?
What do you mean? Is this really that bad?
It's alright, but it's just too basic. Why not make it more fancy like the ones in nice restaurants?
I'm not a professional chef, you know. I can't do that. And you've been living with me and eating my food all this time. How can you suddenly say this?
Living together and marriage are different. I thought if we got married, your cooking skills would get better. Ugh, what a disappointment.
This is the limit of my cooking skills. Don't expect magic for my dishes.
Isn't it normal to expect changes after getting married, though?
As if. I'm not a wizard or anything, okay? He expected us to have the same lifestyle as if we were always eating out at posh places or staying in nice hotels. Even though we had been living together for about 3 months and he should have understood my standard of living, he seemed to think that marriage would magically improve the quality. I thought, could a man who's been single until 42 have such fantasies? Isn't that too much of a dream for women? Keep in mind how great things still were before when you judge my housework abilities. I can't always reach that same level of perfection.
Ugh, you're so useless. Try harder to improve the quality.
He had never behaved like this before marriage. Being older and having never been in a relationship had been a complex for him. He was modest, almost fearful of women, and treated me kindly. Yet, after getting married, he flipped like a switch, began saying harsh things, and looked down on me as if I were far from his ideals. I never thought he was this kind of person. But still, I remember the Tony I dated, believing that with time he would return to his old self. However, that was naive thinking on my part.
Can't something be done about this slightly off-tasting food? Come on, make something better. Isn't it normal for a housewife to be able to cook like we're eating out at a restaurant?
That was all my husband kept saying over and over again. When he was single, he couldn't cook, so he often visited various restaurants to enjoy good food. Because of that, his taste had become refined, and he started criticizing my cooking as terrible and poor. I thought, he used to say my cooking was tasty when we were living together. Who does he think he is? His complaints continued for about 3 months. Initially, he did not call the food bad, but lately he had begun to do so openly, which made his words even more infuriating. Why don't you just make your own food if you're going to complain so much? You've been to plenty of delicious places. Surely you can make something tasty.
How could I possibly cook? I'm not a housewife. Think about what you're saying.
No matter what I said, my husband would just argue back and make excuses. When he found a spot that wasn't perfectly cleaned, he would scrutinize it like an annoying mother-in-law, constantly criticizing me. He'd say things like,
"Clean properly, it's dirty here."
Or,
"I never thought you were incapable of handling housework that much."
He'd often shout at me, insisting he wouldn't do anything and just got stressed for nothing.
I'm getting frustrated with how bad you are at doing housework. Can't you do something about it? Try to do it properly.
I am doing the housework properly. I told you before this is my limit. Can't you understand how hard it is to manage housework while working?
Wow, funny to hear that from you, someone who works at City Hall. You're doing overtime because you're incompetent, right? If you were competent, you could go home on time, right? Don't make excuses for your lack of skills. Try to improve. That's why I keep telling you every day.
He didn't understand anything. I had indeed told my husband that I was a City Hall employee, but I had not yet mentioned that I hold a managerial position. Maybe I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but now I was so appalled by his attitude that I didn't even want to say it anymore. But I had reached my limit of patience. I was determined to speak up and make him understand when he finally crossed a line that he should never have, touching my last nerve. It was a Sunday around noon, and as usual, I was heading to the supermarket to buy groceries for the week. As I drove to the store and realized I had not put my wallet in my bag when I parked, the bag opened and rolled out of the passenger seat. After searching for a few minutes under the assumption that it had fallen underneath the seat, I couldn't find it anywhere in the car. Oh no, I forgot my wallet at home to go shopping. Am I tired lately? I usually shopped at a discount supermarket about an hour away from my apartment, where food items were sold cheaply. After that, I decided to head back to the apartment to get my wallet, knowing it would be evening by the time I got there. Upon arriving and opening the front door, I heard suspicious noises coming from the living room. Huh? Is that Tony's voice? And who's he with? As I was about to take off my shoes, I noticed a pair of women's shoes smaller than mine. Pumps? Are these women's shoes? I knew for sure right then. Women's shoes at the door and weird noises from the living room. It has to be my husband and some other person doing something sketchy. It all clicked. He's cheating on me? He's never been in a relationship before he met me and now he's cheating? I thought of an affair, but considering my husband's past, it seemed unlikely. However, given his recent attitude towards me, it wouldn't be surprising if he really was having an affair. I quietly headed towards the living room, trying not to make a sound. The embarrassing noise I had heard from the entrance grew louder and reached my ears. This woman is too loud. She shouldn't be enjoying herself in someone else's house. To get to the heart of the matter, I slightly opened the living room door to peek inside. There I caught my husband and his mistress, Jane, in the act. What are you doing, you jerk? My anger reached its peak. He had constantly complained about my housekeeping, built up stress on his own, and now he was cheating. Seeing my husband's actions, I was disgusted and began filming the scene through a crack in the door, live streaming it to all our relatives. Then a message from my father-in-law popped up on my WhatsApp.
Punish that fool at a good time for you, Angela. Keep streaming as you barge into the living room. I'm on my way.
At the same time, my father also contacted me, expressing his anger.
I'm coming too. There's no choice but to lecture Tony.
And that's when our counterattack began. I took my moment and burst into the living room. The two jumped up from the sofa, covering themselves with their hands and starting to complain.
Hey, what are you doing?
Live streaming to all the relatives. At that, the two were shocked and lunged at me.
Stop joking. What are you thinking? Stop it.
That's awful. Don't film people naked. Stop it now. What are you talking about? You have some nerve saying that while having an affair. As we were arguing, the front door suddenly slammed open and a bunch of people barged in. I thought, huh? It's just supposed to be my father-in-law and my father, right? Seems like there are a bunch of people. Just as I turned my gaze towards the living room door, my father and father-in-law burst in energetically.
Huh? Dad?
At that moment, following my father-in-law, two police officers in uniform entered, and seeing them, my husband panicked.
Why? Why are there police here? Stop. Don't come near me.
He freaked out and clung to Jane, trembling. However, Jane suddenly pushed him away and yelled, "What are you thinking? Clinging to me in this situation? Ugh, this is the worst."
Huh? Ugh!
It seemed my husband had instinctively clung to Jane upon seeing the police. I was completely taken aback, and both my father and father-in-law looked indescribable. What are you doing, you?
Please stop. I have a trauma with police officers. Don't come closer. Please stop.
My husband then retreated to a corner of the room and cowered there. Confused by what was happening, I asked my father-in-law why my husband was afraid of police officers.
He was quite a troublemaker in high school, well known as a delinquent in our neighborhood. Back then, a particularly scary police officer in the school area got on his case. Once he found out Tony was my son, he gave him a severe scolding, and since then, he's been terrified of police officers.
So you brought those two officers?
Yes, I asked some off-duty friends to come over in uniform today.
But why?
Tony always rebels when I say anything, so unless I have leverage, he won't confess or calm down. This was the only way.
My father-in-law then dragged my husband from the corner to the middle of the living room and made him kneel.
What were you thinking? Always causing trouble, and you haven't changed even as an adult, huh? I'm sorry, really sorry. I apologize for the affair, please. Just send the police away. No, they'll stay until you confess everything.
My husband's eyes were filled with fear. Glancing at the police officers nearby, he looked desperately for a way out. Don't run away. I'll have you explain everything to my father-in-law and everyone else, including how long you've been with Jane.
Why? Why do you have to blame me so much? There's no need to call the family.
Because you've done something blameworthy. Have you no sense of what you're doing? Each time someone raised their voice, the police officers moved a step closer. Every time they moved, my husband flinched and cowered even more. Watching his movements, I felt they were becoming ridiculous, and I kicked Tony and Jane's clothes towards them. Put some clothes on, will you? It's uncomfortable seeing you like this. It's creepy. I said this in a cold voice to the two of them. Once they hurriedly put on their clothes, my father and father-in-law made them sit on the floor between them, ensuring they couldn't move.
So, Tony, tell us what Angela was talking about when she said you've done things to her. Explain clearly, please. Well...
Overwhelmed by my father's imposing demeanor and knowing he held a position at the city hall, my husband couldn't find his voice and he just clammed up. Can't speak? Then shall I spell it all out for you? He nodded slightly, entrusting me to reveal everything. All right, I'll say it then. Tony has always had unrealistic expectations for a spouse. He's been constantly dissatisfied with my housekeeping and complained every day. It's gotten worse over time, and eventually he grew disgusted with my shortcomings, claiming he was stressed out. I couldn't take it anymore.
Is that so? And Tony, did you know that Angela is a division chief at the city hall when you said all those things? What? Division chief?
Shocked by this unexpected revelation from my father, my husband looked at me in surprise.
I didn't know that. I knew you worked at the city hall, but you have a position?
Sorry, I should have told you right from the start, but you just assumed I was a regular staff member, so it was hard to bring it up.
So that's why you were always working late.
Yes, I'm busy because I have a position. Remember you moved into my place when we were dating and just stayed without asking. You do remember that I pay all the rent and utilities, right? You've never contributed to the living expenses. You know what that means, right? Wait a minute. He told me this was his house. What are you talking about? He said he was divorced and led me on, and now I'm exposed and embarrassed. I want compensation for this.
Quiet, outsider. We'll get to your part later, so don't interrupt now. Just wait.
At that moment, my father's aura intimidated everyone around. Tony, Jane, and even the police officers who came with my father-in-law were taken aback by the force in his voice, and a sudden silence fell.
This was bound to happen, Tony. The crime of driving my beloved daughter to mental distress is severe. You see the anger in Angela's father's face, right? Resign yourself to it.
Then my husband knelt down on the spot and apologized to me.
I'm truly sorry. I take back everything I've said to Angela. I also apologize for the affair. Please, don't divorce me. Don't leave me.
Now you say this? I trusted you, but an affair is a deal breaker. It's over. Let's get divorced.
Please, if you divorce me now, I'll be lost.
Hearing these significant words from my husband, I questioned him further. Are you implying you've lost your job?
How did you know?
I could tell by the way you said it. Plus, you've been coming home early lately, so that's what it was.
Yes, that's the situation. So please don't abandon me.
No, after all the scorn and the affair, and now you ask me not to abandon you? Ugh, that's too selfish. Just then, Jane slapped my husband. You're the worst. You lured me in saying I know lots of fancy places because I have money and lied about being recently divorced. And now you're begging your real wife not to leave you? What do you think of me then? You've gone too far. Pay me back for our dates. My husband's words left Jane in shock, and she continued to berate him while crying and shaking him. You were just deceived by my husband. Poor thing.
I wasn't deceiving anyone. I really like her too.
At that moment, another slap from Jane landed on my husband's cheek. Don't mock me. What do you mean I like her? Who's more important to you, me or her? My husband was rendered speechless by Jane's words and just let himself be shaken, unable to respond.
I never thought it would come to such a chaotic scene. I only intended to date her briefly. It was just a fling. I thought my luck was turning when I got married to Angela. That's why I spent all my salary on her. Being with Angela was stressful, so being with someone new was exciting.
Enough with the disrespect. She's practically a victim too. You tricked her into coming here, making her feel like a criminal. Your actions are too selfish. Freed from Jane's grasp, my husband once again knelt before us and apologized.
I understand. I won't ask for forgiveness, but please let me apologize. I'll take all the blame for this. Please overlook her involvement. I really am sorry. If we divorce, I'll leave this house. Is that okay? You think that's enough to be forgiven? You've insulted my daughter. I can't just let that slide. You'll have to pay a decent settlement. Please wait. I'm unemployed right now. Can you please spare me from the settlement? No. You must atone for what you've done.
Then my husband started crying and begging in front of my father.
Please, I'm begging you. What should I do now without a job? Tony, how did it come to this? I knew you were careless, but to be discarded by your company too? I've always struggled at work, bullied and told, you're an idiot. Why can't you learn even one task after 2 years? But think about it. No one ever really taught me anything. Whenever I asked, they'd say, watch and learn. But they never really taught me anything. I tried my hardest, but couldn't do anything. So a month ago, they laughed and said, you're fired. I see. Did you choose the wrong company, or were you just not adaptable? I'm not sure. But maybe I also bear some responsibility since I disciplined you when you were young. Dan, is it really your fault? Tony is already 42 years old, a fully grown adult. It's not right for you to feel responsible. Isn't it Tony who should be taking full responsibility? Are you trying to appeal to everyone's sympathy like some tragic heroine? Shouldn't you be facing the consequences of your actions more seriously? I'm sorry. All I can do now is apologize. I don't know what to do. I can't sympathize with you, Tony. The way you treated my daughter, the affair, and even losing your job, it all seems like you brought it upon yourself. A 42-year-old adult who can't handle his job and gets bullied? Shouldn't you be more responsible? Aren't you still not independent? Saying don't leave me to Angela already shows that. This is a good opportunity to grow up and face real challenges.
Right. You used to brag about living day by day when we were dating, but you were just living without any plan, weren't you? Weren't you actually kicked out of your previous apartment before you moved in with me? As I said this, my husband tensed up as if struck by the truth and looked at me.
Sorry, you're right. I was living carelessly without any plans. I just wanted to eat delicious food, and that's all I spent my money on.
You're such a fool. After being forced to speak about everything he has said to me, the affair, and exposing his own failures, my husband was left speechless. He broke down crying on the spot. Jane, my father, and I all watched him with cold eyes. The only one who showed any sympathy, my father-in-law, approached Tony and said,
Why don't you try to reform now? I'll help you.
But Tony shook him off and refused.
I've lived a terrible life so far. Living without plans and getting married by chance made me arrogant. It was all wrong. I won't ask for help anymore. I'll take care of it myself, Dad. I'm sorry for causing trouble. I'll manage on my own from now on, and I will pay the compensation. I'm an adult, so I should take full responsibility.
Tony said this with a serious look in his eyes toward his father. His gaze was earnest. Whether he could truly change, I didn't know, but at that moment I felt his resolve. So, without further accusations, I let him leave the house and told him to come back later to sign the divorce papers, leaving with my father-in-law.
Do you think Tony can change?
I don't know, but his eyes were as pure as when I first met him. If he can maintain that feeling, maybe he can do it.
Are you going to support him?
No, I can't. I don't have any feelings for him now. Jane, left behind, was listening to our conversations intently. What should I do? I don't know. Stop pretending like you're the one who got hurt when you were the one who cheated. You need to make things right. I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to be deceived by such a fool. I will pay the compensation. Jane diligently shared her contact information with me and quickly left the uncomfortable situation. It's like everyone here is a whirlwind of craziness. I'm just so tired. I said this and finally allowed myself to cry on my father's shoulder. Later, my husband came to the house brought by his father. His head was shaved, appearing to show an outdated form of repentance. Did you shave your head as a sign of repentance?
No, it's more like I'm psyching myself up. I've decided to stop living a sloppy life.
I see. His eyes were different from before. They showed a resolve to accomplish something.
I'm really sorry for what happened. I told him I'd pay the compensation, but Tony is stubborn once he's made up his mind. He told me absolutely not. I will pay, so don't interfere. I want to believe in Tony, but after what happened, if there's any trouble, please call me, Angela.
I heard this from my father-in-law. I want to believe in Tony too, but it's hard to trust him completely after being betrayed once. However, this time I decided to trust his serious eyes and leave him to his own devices. That said, I could only do so because my father-in-law said he would support me. Since then, Jane has paid the compensation properly, and Tony, although in small amounts, has been consistently paying compensation. Occasionally, I receive calls from my father-in-law.
Tony is clumsy when it comes to relationship and being coordinated, unable to do anything smoothly. Even now it seems he's still being teased at work, but he's trying his best and hasn't come back home, living alone and insisting on doing it alone.
Despite his clumsiness, my ex-husband is desperately earning money and managing to live. So far, he has been able to pay the compensation, but I feel like it might revert to how it was before at some point. It's really about how long he can keep up his willpower. I want to believe in him, but it's hard to fully trust him, probably because he's betrayed people before. I realized just how important trust is in relationships because of my husband's actions. Once trust is lost, it takes a long time to regain it. This is exactly what that means. As for me, I continue to live in the apartment, still single. Will I find love again? I think about it, but honestly, I don't feel like dating for a while. The incident has made me even more wary of love. Should I introduce you to a nice guy? When I visit my family home, my sister occasionally says this. I am indeed in my 40s, so she has a reason to worry. Not now. I think I'll find someone eventually. I brushed off her suggestion. But truthfully, I am a little interested in someone. There's this older man who shows up at City Hall every now and then for paperwork. Whenever he sees me, he smiles and waves. I'm being a bit careful because of what happened in the past. I'm not officially dating him, but I might think about it once I get to know him more.